Representative Elkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move that we lay over House File 10,008 for potential inclusion in the omnibus bill.
Okay, the motion is before us. The bill is before us.
Okay.
Please explain to us House File 1008.
I have Jim Hurst with me with the Minnesota Deputy Registrars Association, and I'm going to let him do most of the talking because the Deputy Registrars did quite a bit of analysis in support of this bill, which would increase the fees charged for the services provided by the Deputy Registrars.
Mr. Hurst, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. For the record, my name is Jim Hurst. I'm here today on behalf of the Minnesota Deputy Registrars Association. The Deputy Registrars Association is a trade group comprised of the vast majority of all deputy registrars in the state, whether they be in the metro, the suburbs, the great rural areas of the state, whether they are done by a city entity, a county entity, or a private corporate entity. I wish to start by thanking Representative Elkins as well as the co-authors of House File 1008. This represents a path forward for deputy registrars as we move towards the beginning of year 3 of MNLARS. As many of you are aware, there is separate legislation moving pertaining to deputy compensation for the expenses and losses that they have incurred since the launch of MNLARS, which occurred about a year and a half ago. But what House File 1008 is trying to do is to also put forward the other half of the equation, so to speak. Certainly, we want to see action on compensation, but going forward, we need to return to our historic business model, which is by having our costs being covered by what are quite frankly user fees, which are the filing fees that the customer pays when they visit an office, whether it be for their tabs, their title work, their driver's licenses, and the like. Within your packet, you should have a one-page document, two-sided, that lays out for you some of the past history of the filing fees over the past 30 years, the rationale behind how we arrived at these proposed fee increases, and without any further ado, Mr. Chairman and members, let me basically go over what that document says.
Okay, and Mr. Hurst, if you could, do you have testifiers also?
We have some deputy registrars present in case there are questions that they can answer.
Okay, I just would, again, encourage moving along if we do have testifiers, but either way, I think it's good to condense your testimony.
Very well, will do. So roughly, filing fees are set in statute. Deputies cannot arbitrarily modify those fees, and so it's up to the legislature to establish what those fees are. In the last 30 years, those filing fees have been adjusted on average every 10 years. And these filing fees have not been adjusted in 8 years now for motor vehicle transactions such as tabs and title work, as well as 6 years for driver's license transactions. We certainly cannot wait another couple of years for the average time to go by to address these fees again, unfortunately. When we tried to assess what the proper filing fee should be, we had the mindset to retain the services of a CPA to do what is called a time and motion study. And furthermore, we did that time and motion study prior to the launch of MNLARS so that we had a good base to work off of. Those studies were done in the fall of 2016, and then we did a follow-up study with the very same time and motion study with offices just, I believe it was about 6 months ago. So it was a good year and a half, about a good year after the launch of MNLARS. What we discovered by that did not come as any great surprise to us. In general, And I should point out, the time and motion study took into consideration all office types, whether they be large, small, rural, metro, private, or public. And after we assessed everything, we basically came up with tab renewals increased by 37% in time required to do those transactions. Title work was at least 34% longer, and driver's licenses were ranged from about 34 to 43%. However, it should be noted that when we did the time and motion study for driver's license to create the base, there was only one type of driver's license in existence, the standard. Since that time, of course, we've now had Real ID come into existence, and when we factor that in, it does take a substantially longer time to do Real ID
Mr. Hurst,
transactions.
we have about 10 minutes left.
I'm
of this
sorry,
bill.
Mr. Chairman. I
And
will.
If you could wrap up, because I know that this bill will generate interest and questions, so we want to make sure the committee.
Allow me to conclude by saying that we think that the proposal that we have here is very fair and is certainly a basis that we cannot go backwards from. It is not something that is negotiable to go down from. It is a very fair and honest effort to say this is what we absolutely need at a minimum. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will conclude and entertain any questions you
Thank
may
you. We
have.
have two questions already in the queue. Representative Hausman, Representative Petersburg, Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the establishment, or establish that issuance of a duplicate title is an expedited transaction and carries an additional $20 fee. Are you saying that's a $20 increase over current?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Hurst.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Hausman, first of all, it's a $10, not a $20 expedited fee. There are currently some services that are subject to an expedited fee, in which case that does carry a $20 cost, that $10 is retained by the deputy, and the other $10 is submitted to the state of Minnesota. In this case, it is limited to just the duplicate title printing on site by the deputy, in which case the deputy would charge the $10 fee for their operation. There would be no additional $10 charge to the state. And yes, that would be on top of the filing fee that would be charged for a title service.
Representative Hausman.
And so added to the base, what would that be that you're now paying for a duplicate title?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Hausman, the duplicate title fee currently is $10 that the deputy charges. We are proposing that go up to $13.50. So it would be the $13.50 filing fee plus the $10 expedited fee to have that title printed and in the customer's hand as soon as they came in and walked out the door. The alternative,
Just
and
give me a
again,
number?
pardon me?
Hausman.
Can you just give me a number? Current fee plus this increase, what would a duplicate title cost? I don't need a breakdown,
yeah.
just the total.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Hausman, I can only speak to what the fee is from the deputy standpoint. Currently, if you walked in and wanted a duplicate title printed on site, it would be a $10 filing fee, and that would be it. Under this proposal, it would be $23.50 that the deputy registrar would retain. And the $10 expedited fee is reflective, it's an option, and it is only in those cases where the customer wants that title immediately. And currently, we cannot even cover the charge for the paper that we are charged by the state to supply this, nor do we cover the cost of actually printing it up, the toner costs and everything as well.
Sounds like doubling the fee, but it's a lot of words. I don't
Okay,
know.
we'll,
Sounds like more than doubling the fee.
Mr. Burris, any clarity on, or Mr. Lee, on what is the percentage increase we're looking at in this bill in terms of the fee?
Mr. Chair and members, actually, I was just going to note that I think there might be an ambiguity as to what the intent is on the amount of fee that is intended to be set by this. The $10 is the amount retained under that section that's being cited. But the fee that would be set in general for an expedited service is $20. So I can work with the author, depending on movement on the bill, to clarify if the intent is to set a $10 fee.
And
for
if I
this
may, real
expedited service.
briefly, Mr. Chairman, I did have this very discussion with the revisor's office because I was concerned of that ambiguity, and I said I want it to be just the $10, not to be considered as a $20. And I was assured that the way this was written, that took care of that, but I will work
And
with
members,
you.
just to manage the rest of this meeting, we have 4 more members with questions. I see a testifier now from the public. Is there anyone else that wants to testify on this bill? Okay. If it's okay with the committee, I think we're just going to have to extend till about 2:20. I really want to make sure that members' questions are answered, and then we can lay this bill over and proceed from there. So I would just, again, ask members to keep your questions short and the testifiers keep your answers brief. We have Representative Petersburg next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And really what I want to do is just offer my support for this bill. I am disheartened that it does not appear that we're going to be able to get reimbursement back to the deputy registers that's going to keep them whole for what they've done. Yet at the same time, we know that they are continually going backwards in its in their expenses versus what they're bringing in. And so I think this is one avenue in which we have to do something to allow the deputy registers to stop, first of all, stop hemorrhaging with the funding they have, and then into the future to be able to recoup some of the losses that they have in which we're not going to be reimbursing them for. And Mr. Chair, I would also just give you an option here is, I think this is important enough for us to move fast and forward that if you want more time, but I would highly recommend maybe going right to the general register rather than keeping it here and let it go as a standalone bill, but that certainly would be your call. Thank
We
you, Mr.
can
Chair.
always move on bills in various times, but to your point, we are going to hear on Thursday night Representative Hansen's bill for the third time. Maybe the third time will be the charm for deputy registrar reimbursement related to MNLARS. So that bill is progressing in the Senate as well, and I think it's our intention to do that as a standalone. Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to get something clarified. I know that the deputy register's workload has been increased. My question is more to the agency, is if the workload is being done by the deputy registers, shouldn't the money be coming from the agency rather than us having to increase fees? Or is it not true? Am I interpreting something here that is nobody in the agency's workload is being decreased? It's just a matter that the work done by the deputies is being increased.
I'm going to have Representative Elkins respond to that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, because I've spoken with a wide variety of stakeholders to this process, and my understanding is that in part, the shifting of the workload to the deputy registrars to the front office is in part intentional. And as an IT guy, a data guy, I would say that as a matter of best practice, anytime you can push the data entry and the data validation to the front end of the process, so you don't have a process where the data is being entered and then somebody else is checking it again, that's actually a good thing. But I think Representative Mason raises a good point, is that when we are, looking at the agency's budget, that we ought to very carefully, I mean, if that is in fact the intention, then there ought to be economies in the back office that we should be looking for when we consider the agency's budget.
Thank you. We have an actual deputy registrar. Did you want to make any quick comments?
I do.
State
Thank you.
your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Julie Hansen. I am the Property and Customer Service Manager for Scott County. I am a deputy registrar. I am technically here today to represent the Minnesota Association of County Officers. I did have some brief comments of support regarding that, but I will keep my comments very brief. the reason I sort of bulldozed my way up here, and I appreciate your recognition, I apologize for that, was to answer Representative Hausman's question directly regarding the fee. The current fee for a duplicate title for a customer walking into the office is $17.25. If you were to take into account both the filing fee increase as well as the expedited fee that the customer would be charged, the cost on that would now be $30.75. So,
Very helpful.
Thank
Very
you.
helpful. Thank you.
thank you very much.
So we have two more members on the list, and if anyone else wants to be recognized, please let me know. Representative Koznick and Representative Tabke. So Representative Koznick.
Thank you, and I know we're a little short on time here, but I have no opposition to the bill. Real ID was mentioned, and over the course of some of these discussions was the amount of additional work as we try to get that system more up and running. And I was wondering if there's consideration to add in here some recognition of the additional work for the registrars in this bill, if that's forthcoming, or you're going to do a separate bill, but it seems like it'd be an opportune time to have that in here. I didn't really see it in there, but
That, I think Representative.
maybe to the
Koznick,
author,
I think
just
Mr. Hurst.
almost more of a statement than,
Oh, okay.
depending on our time. I know time is
No,
short, but I wanted to put
it's
that on
a
the record.
valid question with the Real ID coming up. Mr. Hurst, briefly.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Koznick, this bill also includes or proposes a $4 filing fee increase for driver's license transactions, and that's to reflect the extra workload for Real ID transactions.
Okay, thank you. Representative Tabke, I believe, is the last member on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully this is a quick one, but just have a quick question. As I look through the governor's bill, Representative Elkins, a lot of this was included in the governor's bill. Have you had a chance to compare the two of them to see how similar these numbers are to that, and if we're looking at the same thing between the two of them?
I have not yet.
Thank you.
Okay. Members, are there any additional questions of the author, any of the testifiers on House File 1008? Okay, Representative Mason?
I guess I'm still not sure about I didn't get my clarification. Is the agency decreasing their workload? And if they are, why are we shouldn't the money be coming from that end rather than raising the money from consumers?
Is that directed at any of either the author or either of the testifiers, Representative Mason?
Mr. Chair, I'll take a stab at it.
Okay, Representative Elkins, why don't you answer that in the middle?
Historically, the deputy registrars have been entirely dependent on the fees for their revenues.
Representative Mason? Okay, Representative
But yeah,
Torkelson.
as I said, the deal is I know the deputies have additional responsibilities.
We're extending the hearing a few minutes, Representative
But
Torkelson, so.
that would,
Oh,
but if
sorry.
this work was done in-house or by the agency people before, that means either somebody's workload is being decreased, and shouldn't that money be allocated first before we raise additional funds?
Response from the
I
author?
mean, we can talk
or-
about this some other time.
Well,
but-
no,
Very-
we're extending the hearing 5 minutes, so that's enough time to get your question answered and to have Representative Torkelson ask his. Any comments from the author or testifiers on
Mr. Chair, what I
Representative
would
Mason?
answer is that I think, again, the registrars are accustomed, it's traditional for them to be entirely fee-based, but I do think that when we consider the agency's budget, we should be looking for cost-effectiveness, efficiencies in the back room that we would expect from the shift in the workload.
Thank you. Is that, any further questions, Representative Mason? Okay. Representative
That'll be
Torkelson.
fine.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the comments of both Representative Mason and Representative Elkins. I think that's an appropriate conversation that we should have. And just to add to the kind of current landscape, my understanding is that it is the intention of the chair in the other body across the street that the deputy registrar compensation bill that's being considered to be the only deputy registrar compensation bill to be considered, which I find interesting.
Well, we're considering this one on this side of the street. We'll see what happens.
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, I understand that, but it will be the only one of the session
Yeah.
if the chair on the other side of the street has his way.
Correct. Okay, yeah, we asked Mr. Howe to see, he informed me of that just a few minutes ago. So before we adjourn, any final comments? Thank you very much for your testimony. And again, whenever you're here or there's any deputy registrars here, thank you for your work. We understand the circumstances you're under, and I think this is a very important bill, and that's why we're laying it over, and I think will be considered in our omnibus bill. So thank you very much.